T-44 match on Sand River with Assassinated and Death by Snoo Snoo. We are top tier and also the only island of decency in a team full of bads. The enemy team have quite a significant amount more skill on their team. Well, we have obviously the better players, but that's only 3 of us. The enemy team has got much better dispersed skill. In most situations, I'd rather have a full team of decent players than a single platoon of excellent players. Simply because the gap between, say, myself and any of the sort of decent enemy players isn't that huge, and so having more of them than there are of us really does go a long way. So I head to the North Dunes to do a little bit of spotting, a little bit of shooting, whatever I can get. This isn't exactly my favourite map for the T-44 since it somewhat lacks gun depression, but it could be worse. And because I'm top tier, I can play kind of riskily like I'm doing here to get shots on enemies who aren't paying attention. So some of the lower tier enemies are hanging around out in the open where I can easily single them out without exposing my tank to the rest of their team. And so that's exactly what I do. The enemy T-44 charges around the corner thinking he'll be able to duel me, I suppose, before realising I actually do have support up here. Now you can see here I'm driving out just far enough to hit the 25-2, but not far enough out to be hit by anything else. Here again the T-44 decides to charge around the corner. This time he comes a little further out. He goes for the Panzer IV, and since I know he's just fired, I pop out. However, the A-44 does a little bit of an interesting manoeuvre over the back slope of the dune and kills my support. I'm then almost simultaneously hit by the Pershing and the Hellcat, so I pull back a minute. That's rather a large amount of hit points to lose in one go. I thought the A-43 was just going to be an annoyance until he figured out how to pen me. And just the constant fire coming from him, especially as I had to turn my back to face the more dangerous gun of the A-44, was a real problem. You'd see me yelling in chat help to my platoon mates. I was quite worried at this point that the enemy T-44 would push around the back of the hill and kill me. Fortunately for me, neither him nor the Hellcat had the wherewithal to actually push. I have no idea what stopped them. They should have clearly seen I was the only person there. I had no real support. But I'm not going to complain since it allowed me to survive and probably went a long way towards helping us win the game. The other thing that made us win the game is our south push, making it all the way into the enemy base already, as I miss an easy shot on the A-43. As you can see, the T-44 shifted down there to try and defend. There's a couple other enemy tanks hanging around there, but our team is busy establishing a pretty firm foothold here. I'm about to go around the dune when I notice the KV-2 is up. That's a gun I would like to remove from the game, and so I just reverse up, auto aim and snapshot, and it actually hits. SU-101 gets dealt with, and then the Pershing is the only remaining target up here since the M18 Hellcat has gone and nested himself in a particularly useless position where he can't shoot at any of us. Assassinator gets wiped out by the KV-2, which blows his shit up with an HE round. I find it best not to get complacent with KV-2s, even if you're driving a tier 8 tank. It's best not to risk it. That's not to say I won't drive around to try and get a shot into one if I know it's loaded, but it is to say I will avoid getting hit if I can, or at the very least try and present the worst possible shot to it. So with the Hellcat not doing anything and the Pershing apparently bottled up in a one of the little re-entrants at the foot of that hill, I worked my way around. The Pershing's actually crested over the hill and come out the other side. He's busy with somebody else, so I get a couple of quick shots into him before he then returns fire at me, firing gold now, APCR. Probably he had it loaded to deal with Snoo, which I didn't actually consider at the time. I thought he was just firing gold at me because he saw I was a decent player. As you can see, he's not. He's in fact terrible. And at this point, I was getting rather irritated with shit players firing gold rounds at me for no reason other than I'm good. The Pershing by no means needs gold dependent a T-44 anyway. Even frontally angled, he would still pay me quite happily. Even though that appears to be the stock, or not the stock gun, but the less powerful 90mm, that is actually the top gun. I do use a model replacement for the Pershing, so it appears in its historical configuration when it's fully upgraded. So I decided to taunt him a little in chat, which is probably kind of a pubby thing to do, but like I said, I was just getting fed up with it. And as I put it to him, firing gold at people won't make you good. Now there are times and places where it's appropriate, and certainly you've probably seen me do it a lot in my videos, but a lot of bad players seem to have the misguided notion that if they fire gold all the time at everything, it'll make them have better stats. The difference between a good player and a bad player has very little to do with whether you pen every shot or not. It even has very little to do with how many hit points you have at the end of the game. In fact, the vast majority of what makes a difference between a good player, say, somebody at my level or above me even, and an average or even terrible bad player, is, well, there's a couple of things. Situational awareness, which is a basic thing everyone should have. It's a basic survival skill. Map awareness, which ties in with situational awareness, and sense of positioning. Positioning, I think, is probably one of the biggest things in the game, and it's one of the most overlooked. If you know where to put your tank, especially if you know what the pubby meta is and how to break that pubby meta by placing your tank in a place they don't think it should be, you can do some absolutely magical things. By the same token, if you know how to actually, let's call it strategic positioning. If you know how to tactically position your tank, say you know how to angle, you know how to side scrape, you know how to exploit terrain to make your armor that much more useful. Like my videos in the 416 where I follow trench lines so I can't be shot, or videos in my Wheezy 120 where I find a gentle slope so I can actually point my gun down. Or in a Centurion where I'm finding good hull downs and driving around from one hull down to the next. That is the difference. Look at a bad player. I guarantee you will not see that. You might see them pen shots, you might see them survive games, you will not see them position, because they have no fucking clue what they're doing. They'll drive around aimlessly, they might block teammates, they might follow somebody who's better than it, or they just might follow the first tank they see. They might even go to a position they have a vague idea is influential, say the hill on Melanovka or the small village on Rulenberg. They'll go there, but once they're there, they'll just sort of shoot their gun a couple of times and die. They don't actually realize why that position is important, how to exploit that position the best, and then what to do once that position has been taken. And truly, I think that is the real big difference between less skilled or more casual players who don't invest as much time or effort into the game, and the players who end up excelling and propelling themselves into the top, say 5,000-10,000 players on the server. That's the thing I've consistently noticed, is that most of the players who are better than me, they aren't better shots than me. They usually aren't better at actually positioning their tank, side scraping or using terrain. They aren't better at that than me. Where they're actually better than me is their ability to position themselves on the map and reposition as needed. Quite often I'll hesitate, or I won't be in the right place, or when I'm excuse me, I'm trying to move from one position to the other, I take a bad route. I think that is biggest thing in this game, knowing where to be, when to be there, and what to do. And none of those are things that bad players understand. So, I mean, if you're watching this and you want to figure out how to improve at the game, I wouldn't worry so much about, shooting gold ammo or carrying all gold consumables or any of that shit. The first thing after, not shooting HE or driving into lakes, the first thing I'd focus on is figuring out what your tank's good at, how you can maximize whatever it is your tank's good at, say side scraping a KV-4 or doing some passive and active scouting in a Soviet medium. Find out those things and do them, and then also look at the maps and look where the good players position, look where the fight develops, especially over a large number of games. Pay attention to what's going on. This is kind of how pubbies figure out their meta, and it's kind of, it's how the play of each map eventually evolves. But keep in mind, when you look at the map, instead of the pubby mindset of this is how this map must be played, look at the map and think this is how the map usually plays out, and what would happen if I went here instead of here. And I think you might start seeing some results fairly quickly.